Currently in Throne of Liberty, the best weapon combo for healing is the longbow plus the wand. Now I want to go over my build update, particularly covering new gear that comes with the raid, and I do want to give a little bit more insights with regards to the flexibility of different skills you can use. Accompanying this, there will be a build document which will go over pretty much everything you need to know to put together this build for yourself and figure out what different options there are and what you can put together yourself rather than actually going for the min-max. You don't have to get always the best stuff to make do with healing. You just need to know what you're doing and what stats to actually prioritize. I'll leave a link in the video description. You can access that for yourself, and yes, we'll walk you through the different parts in this video. We will begin with our skill setup. And this is generally what I use right here. Keep in mind, this is like a pacifist healer. You're pretty much doing no damage other than your basic attacks. You're there simply to keep your allies alive. And your job is to do whatever possible to achieve that. So you pretty much take everything in your kit that can either top people's hit points off or give them a ton of survivability to tank a bunch of damage. And there are some things you can switch around that boost your own stats, that give extra damage to your team, and we'll get into that. But let's have a look at the actual skills we're using and what combos and how you want to actually use those skills. So once we have all these skills slotted, we need to look at skill specializations, and I recommend taking these for the longbow here and then these for the wand. In the document, the active and passive skills are displayed here with those specializations. It's then very important to look at weapon mastery, as that will also give you a big boost and change some of the skills slightly. But let's actually get into how to use these skills and how to actually keep your allies alive. Now for healing, it's not always going to be one case fits all. You shouldn't really just spam your skills and hope for the best. You want to learn the mechanics of the fight and use your skills accordingly. We'll start with Flash Wave. This is one of your most powerful heal over time abilities that you can put on everybody within that massive area. You always want to use it just before your teammates are going to take a bunch of damage. For example, in this case, I'm going to get petrified. Teammates are going to have to avoid these whirling blades. So what I do, as soon as that circle pops on me, I'm moving back, channeling that flash wave, I release it, I get petrified, I can no longer heal them, but now they have this good heal over time on them so that if they do take a bit of damage here, they'll be kept alive. I don't recommend just spamming the thing, as it's very unlikely you'll be able to get 100% uptime on this unless you have a ton of buff duration and cooldown speed, which you may still be a newer healer and that may not be the case. So just make sure you're using it when you know your teammates are going to take damage. I also use it to keep the tank alive if I don't need to save it for everybody else. However, there's a better skill you can use for keeping the tank alive, and that is Healing Touch. You won't really see me often use this one, as I'm still getting used to healer and I don't really enjoy the spammy nature of it. But basically, you want to cast this on your target, that can be you or one of your party members, and you will give them this heal over time. Now you will want to cast it 3 times on them. That gives them 3 of those stacks, which means they'll heal for, like 2,500 on my build right now. It's going to be healing for like 4,000 per tick on a near maxed out build. It heals for a crazy amount of time, just all the time. It's very similar heal amount that Flash Wave has, and you can support that further with effects like Nature's Blessing, which we'll get into. But this heal over time, you will also see some healers put on multiple targets, and you can do so. You can maintain it not just on one person, but like 2, 3, maybe even 4, depending on your buff duration and cooldown speed. But it gets tiring, and honestly, if you want to take it chill, you just put this thing on the tank. You can also get away with pretty much in any content foregoing this skill altogether. It's not overly necessary, but it will up your game, especially when challenging content comes down the road that you're new to and you want to make sure your entire team has as much healing as possible. So you can get used to switching targets and casting that on them. I will jump to Nature's Blessing, as this ties directly into Healing Touch. You can see with this specialization right here, as soon as you cast Nature's Blessing, they will receive massive extra heal over time. You see this right here, all of those double ticks basically. More than enough healing to get anybody to full super quick. But again, you have to have had put a healing touch stacks on them first. So again, I will usually just do that on the tank. And then you will use Nature's Blessing as in, oh shit, the tank took a bunch of damage, and you will instantly get them to full really quickly. Alternatively, you can use Swift Healing. Now the reason I say alternatively is because they share a cooldown. If you've gone and used Healing Touch, then you can't instantly use Swift Healing. However, your cooldowns will generally be quite low, at least when you start working on your build and getting a lot of cooldown, that it doesn't really matter too much. But you will see in my gameplay, I will usually just use Swift Healing and not bother with Healing Touch. But that is just me not wanting to micromanage Healing Touch all the time. And that way, when the need arises to instantly heal somebody up quick and you have that reaction time, you can use Swift Healing to do so. You can cast it 3 times. Each time does have a bit less healing, but in total it's going to heal like 20,000 or more depending on your build again. And so we'll easily get most people back to full. Then we'll look at Purifying Touch. This is simply in our kit because it just gives a little bit of a cleanse. We'll also give a bit of attack speed boost too, which is nice, but it's very situational. There's not a lot of times people will get debuffs, and if everybody's getting a debuff, you have a better skill for that. Clay's Salvation. With its specialization right here, it will completely cleanse the entirety of one weaken effect. So maybe even if you had 2 or 3, then yes, Purifying Touch gets useful as backup. And it's also very important for PvP, but we're just talking about PvE right now. So you won't find yourself using it all too much, but just keep an eye out on the debuffs that your allies get, the red icons on the left here. Most of them you can cleanse. Then we look at Fountain of Life. I will say, as a melee damage dealer, I highly appreciate it when healers pretty much always put this thing down. When it's off cooldown, just put it down. If you have enough cooldown speed, you'll be able to nearly have the thing on the ground all the time. Now we're going to put Deadly Marker on our target. That's going to chunk off a bunch of seconds there. We get a bit more cooldown speed. And yeah, you can nearly put this thing down non-stop. And I always recommend placing that thing right on the tank like this, along with it being enough room so that melee damage dealers, when they're positioned around the boss, can also take advantage of it. And even if they don't need the healing, the mana from this is huge, and you need to have that spec here. I do recommend having it a larger area because again, you can place it on the boss like that, and other people who are around the boss can get that heal, and you also want to extend the duration. Then we have Invincible Wall. You have the option to have this targets expanded to affect everybody in the team, and I do recommend doing so. It will be an ability. You'll give a shield to everybody, say their full hit points. If you think they're going to take some damage like from these balls, they may as well have that extra layer of protection. Also, when the boss is going to do a fury attack or wrath attack, somebody might not dodge, and that extra bit of shield, that extra bit of hit points can save them. Another really clutch ability is Blessed Barrier. This thing is huge for the amount of defense it gives everybody. You can have targets expanded. Yes, it does reduce the amount of defense you give, but you then have the option to give it to multiple people. When you're doing these high level trials, if you fail to dodge, you can end up just getting one shot because you're running like squishier builds and the damage just gets ridiculously high. But if you put Blessed Barrier on them, you pretty much reduce the damage enough that they won't get one shot anymore. Of course, that will depend how squishy they are, but in this case, tier 9 crypt, it could bring it from dealing like 25,000 damage, which would one-shot me, down to like 18,000, which would not. And the same with Trizzy right there. You can also give it to a tank who's going to take a ton of damage, and it's, again, all about the different content, the mechanics the bosses are going to do, and using those powers accordingly when it best fits the situation. Just be aware of what those powers actually do. Then here we have Deadly Marker, which we mentioned is simply going to give you and your team a ton of cooldown reduction. Whenever they critically hit the marked target, everybody gets their cooldowns reduced. Super nice. You can combine that with Blitz by using Blitz with Deadly Marker to sustain a pretty high uptime. Due to the cooldown of this being like 18 seconds, it lasts 9 seconds, and so we can use Blitz and then cast this after it drops off our target. But be aware, Blitz does have like 45-second cooldown, so you're not going to be able to do that all the time, but that's what you can use it for. However, if you want to make sure you have extra healing output, you can also Blitz Flash Wave. They have changed in the past that you can no longer Blitz Fountain of Life. But yes, the two options I would recommend blitzing is Deadly Marker or Flash Wave. It just allows you to instantly bring them off cooldown. You just have to be aware it's going to be based on what ability you've cast. So if I cast Flash Wave right now, I can then press Blitz and I gain back Flash Wave to use it again. But I may as well just wait until Flash Wave's expired, otherwise there's no much point in that. It's not going to stack. Lastly, we have Enchanting Time here. That's the name of the skill when you have this specialization point. Without it, you have Time for Punishment. I don't really recommend using Time for Punishment because you have the Wand Mastery Corrupting Hit and you're going to use quite a bit of basic attacks, and you'll probably have Time for Punishment already on your target through this. Additionally, if you have other wand damage dealers like Furies, Invocators, they'll also put Time for Punishment, and it doesn't stack between themselves, so you just want one person to have that up, and so you may as well use Enchanting Time. You can put this on yourself, you can put this on other people to boost their damage. You put it on a tank, you're boosting their threat, making sure they have the aggro. Put it on yourself and you're going to boost your heals. And you also have that ability to give a little bit of a shield and the effect where you can pass through enemies. But that, I believe, is all of the skills explained and how I would recommend using them. Just be aware there is some switches you can do based on the specializations. For example, here I don't have the extra range increase on Invincible Wall. Sometimes you might want that instead of, say, on Clay Salvation. Or maybe you don't need the extended duration on Blessed Barrier because you're good at timing when to use it. And then you could have both these targets expanded. And then the area on those is pretty huge, and that's great for when you're in fights where everybody's freaking spread out, which is definitely like in those raids. You could have the Whirlpool effect here on your Nature's Blessing, and I believe that through this mastery would give you some extra cooldown, but it does reduce your total healing, and you could have a little bit of an extra heal when Healing Touch expires, or you could apply Healing Touch when you remove a debuff of Purifying Touch, but all these things just take up more specialization points, and this is honestly the core of what you want. If you find you're not healing yourself enough and you do use Swift Healing, then you could have this one too, but that's a lot of specialization points. Feel free to experiment yourselves. I just hope this helps as a core baseline on what to use. Quickly mentioning the passives, this one here is simply to give us that extra recovery, which is going to help with our heal over times from our Flash Wave, Healing Touch. This one does that too. Then you have the extra shield. This is pretty much just for yourself. It helps a lot, like in oh shit moments, you take a bunch of damage, you gain this shield and you might not die to a follow-up hit. This simply gives us 20% attack speed when we stand still for 2 seconds. There's just nothing better really to use here. Devotion and Emptiness, massive boost to healing, 36%. Noble Revival, this is what makes max mana super useful for you. Every 1000's another 3% healing. Saint's Oath, this is a chance when you take damage to increase your healing, so not overly useful, but can be neat when you take lots of damage over time. And this is another one here that can give you a ton of extra healing gain just by healing allies, even healing yourself. For example, my healing stat here, 155%, I put down Fountain, this is one's going to trigger it, and we're now at 195%. Again, be aware of the masteries. This is everything I would go for, step by step, depending on what level you are at. Nothing too game changing here, simply giving you extra healing boosts and cooldown boosts. Yes, this one I believe won't show, but it does actually boost your overall outgoing healing. And then the rest of these nodes are pretty much just to get stats that are useful to us, like buff duration, and we have to take this extra node here and like this one here to be able to get these ones over here without it activating this one or this one. Overall mastery bonuses, you simply just take these 4. The only really useful ones is Potential and Fountain of Revitalization. The other 2 are kind of whatever. But now we will look at gear. You can see in the document right here I have like a max heal build set up, I have this in quest log as well, and it's pretty much everything I've put together that I find would give you the best capabilities for maximum healing output, along with a ton of buff duration and cooldown speed. You could potentially push cooldown speed even further, but I find that's not overly necessary. You will end up just sacrificing healing. Like, look at that healing percent here, 194%. This will go higher again with all those temporary boosts, and this is the most powerful stat. Aside from max damage, which does affect healing, this is super effective. I won't go through everything with regards to all the different stats, but you can read the details here in the document, how each stat is useful to us and how I would also prioritize them. But just to touch on attributes, you want to get like wisdom and perception as high as possible. Max is 99, so this build maxes those out. Dexterity you want to get to like 30, and the rest you can all dump in strength. You can see the gear here. We're using the sacred set. That's 30% healing. It's huge. However, be aware of the alternative, which is to go with the Ardent set. This simply gives you another 20% cooldown speed, which can be very useful if that's what you need. But I would say you generally don't have to spam heals as much in PvE, not like PvP, because you have mechanics and you can time when to use your abilities. You don't necessarily need them all of the time. And a lot of the case, you will actually just be saving abilities to make sure you have them ready to go exactly when you need them. So you don't necessarily need to go all into cooldown speed, what this Ardent set would do. And again, you are taking a hit to your maximum healing here as a result. This gear here is also pretty expensive and not something everybody will have, and that's totally fine. There's a ton of alternatives with regards to accessories. This should be a more budget option right here, with ones you can obtain pretty easily. And it also doesn't have the legendary gear if you haven't yet got to the raid level, or if you're just in tier 1, want to make a pretty cheap enough build. I don't know how much these field boss weapons are these days, but they're like the best tier 1 healing weapons. You can of course use alternatives, but again, you're focusing on those stats and in the priority as I describe in the document. I have made a calculator, a link in the end of the document, which you can also use to input your stats based on one build versus another build, but just be aware it doesn't account for stats like cooldown speed, attack speed, buff duration, which can all be very helpful stats, but don't actually improve your total amount of healing of your abilities, just the durations and the rate at which you can use them again. Also be aware, there is a survivability build here, and that's because these ones, as I described right here in bold red, it's for max healing. You are sacrificing health for healing because that's what you're trying to do, keep everybody alive. But there's always going to be a line. Like, you don't want to be getting one shot from mechanics, so you might need a bit of more health depending on the content. Like, this survivability build is super simple switches. All you're doing pretty much is changing some runes and synergies, so that only costs you a bit of Solent, and then the artifacts here. You go the full ancestral armor, and you've got over 10,000 hit points from this more squishy build. More than enough you need. On top of skill damage resistance, you go from like 350 all the way to nearly 600, which is huge, and this will probably be adequate even for nightmare mode and not getting one shot. And again, don't go saying a build's garbage just because it doesn't currently have the level of hit points you think it should have. There's very simple switches you can do, like just changing runes, and that's pretty much for free other than the cost of Solent to switch around. In the document here, I highlight that pretty explicitly and repeat myself quite often that remember, you can simply switch some runes to like skill damage resistance or max health. The balance is up to you. I'm simply showing a build right here that gives max healing. And this build sacrifices some of that for health, and that's an example. Now, in terms of your weapons and legendary weapons, well, it's debatable which you should go for. Either the legendary wand or the legendary bow. And honestly, I would just put it down to what are the other builds you play? I mean, if you're just a dedicated healer and that's all you want to do, I would actually recommend going with bow. The main reason is because a lot of your healing output is going to be through the heal over times. A lot of healers will rely on that rather than the reactive healings of wand. And you'll only use wand for things like Invincible Wall, Blessed Barrier, and Fountain of Life. And so in most cases, you'll make more use of the bow to improve all of those heal over times. So this here is a setup with that legendary bow instead of the legendary wand. There is a little bit of a difference with regards to the stats you can choose here and the stats you gain, but it's not going to be that big a deal. I would also say the bow is probably going to pair better with the orb if that's what you want to go with. Wand is already a bit of mitigation and those reactive healing, and I think it can probably go better, the bow with its heal over times, with the mitigation from then the orb, particularly because wand has a little bit of shields, and this just seems like it's going to be wasted when you are going to have a whole weapon orientated around shields. So if you want to win max, I would go with the bow. As for the other weapons and like the skill cores, wands does have a bunch of options like the Overture, Consumables, and Cordy. Very useful ones there. Different effects as well. Like the Overtures, more heal over time. Consumables, good damage reduction. And Cordy also just increasing the size of that shield. The bow, I don't think there's really any alternative to the Arc of Lunar Radiance, just because of that nice attack speed boost it has with Shining Moon. As for armor, I would go with the legendary armor piece, and you can see some notes on accessories, traits, and then yes, those rune synergies, again what I would go with. When you're going max healing, you don't take the synergy here on the bracelet because there are just some pretty bad runes, and you just take max mana. Same on the belt. And the earring, you can nearly go with all max mana as well, but if you have the chaos runes like this build shows, you can take a ton of extra healing ones. But you might not have those. I think the drop rate's pretty poor. So if you look back on this step 2 build, you can see how it has no chaos runes, and how, as an example on the weapons, you could take all just healing runes. But sometimes you might want the synergy here to get the wisdom to actually hit 79. That can be more useful. In this case, you don't want to go to 80 because we are at the borderline of we can't get much more wisdom anyway, and so we may as well get the extra healing through Blessing of Wisdom if we say didn't need the cooldown. As for artifacts, I have that displayed here. You can see what stats are there, what I would go for. Maybe it's a bit easier to see in quest log here with the stats on those, simply ones that give boosts to healing and stats that maybe would as well, like heavy attack. The Tallystone 3 is usually the most important one. You want to get healing on that max mana. And yes, if you want to go full survivability, you simply go all ancestral. Like going with 2 Chaos Springer is just to get that crit hit chance. And then you can also use the Solar Stone for a bit of health when you need it and a heal. And then the Lunar Stone, when you use a control skill, it has to be a damage one, you will gain an extra bit of base damage. And that's just going to be when you use Flash Wave. This is a control skill, you do damage with it, and you'll also gain that base damage boost. And other than that, we just have some consumables here. This is all the different food you can use. You generally don't have to min-max with it, and I wouldn't use it until you're going into like super challenging content. Getting this extra healing here, health for yourself, movement speed, attack speed, skill damage resistance, and skill damage boost. All will help healing a little bit. And finally, Guardians. There's a bunch of different options you can use, and generally I would use Lady Knight. It helps for like the clutch moments where you might die. Just give yourself the big shield real quick. Maybe you can't block an attack because you ran out of stamina. You'll simply use Lady Knight and you'll gain a ton of shield just like there, a ton of extra hit points, and you probably won't get one shot then by the block attack. They have a 10-minute cooldown, so it's not like you can really rely on them for much. And finally, you can see the additional resources here. The quest log link, basic healing formula, which will lead you to this document. You can input stats, values, you can confirm in game here. Just make sure you account for everything, including all the temporary bonuses you gain through passives. But yes, that's my healing build guide as of to date. It will be interesting to see what orb brings to the table, but my hunch is it would replace wand. They have said it's going to be a mitigation shield type weapon, and then you would want to back that up with all the heal over times that the bow gives you. As I think a lot of healers, even myself included, rely a lot on these heal over times. But we'll have to see. Overall, I hope this helps. Thanks all for watching, and we'll see you guys around.